Hi, everybody. I am Tracy Stuckrath with Thrive Meetings and Events, and welcome to the Eating at a Meeting podcast live edition. Each week, we talk to experts in food and beverage around the world and across the country that are chefs and farmers and dietitians and lawyers and eaters to understand how we can create safe, sustainable, and inclusive food and beverage experiences. For the month of March, and today is the last day of March, I have been highlighting and interviewing women who I think are doing really awesome and cool things in the food and beverage field. And so you need to check out all of those episodes. But I have one more today, and I'm so excited to talk to Chef Kristina Stanley, and who was introduced to me by Amy of Belly and the Beast. And you can check her podcast episode out. She was one of the women that I honored back in 2020, but she's episode 9 of the Eating at a Meeting podcast. So check that out. But Amy introduced me to Kristina because Kristina, through an organization that she works for, iCollective, was in-house residency at Belly of the Beast in Boston for 3 months. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that and what she does now and how she, as who is taking her Indigenous heritage and spreading wealth of love and generosity and yumminess through tribal foods. So welcome to the show, Kristina.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
I'm excited for you to be here too. So I didn't just say, but Kristina, you are a food activist, a community organizer, and a chef. And you've been doing that since you were 13, about?
Yeah, I mean,
ago, right? Yeah.
For as long as I can remember. I mean, I come from a family that was really involved with various community organizations through, the church and the VFW, and both of my parents took turns being president of the local JCs. And so I feel like from just a really young age, I was kind of in that sort of community like environment where people were building community around food and a lot of food-based events. And so I got involved and just really excited about that from a really young age.
Well, and that's really cool because I like the focus of what you're doing is reintroducing or celebrating Indigenous foods and utilizing tribal products and foods into the foods that you create. And you did that at Belly of the Beast. And so first, before we get really into that, can you talk about what Indigenous foods means for the listeners?
Sure. I mean, essentially, the way I kind of describe Indigenous foods to the Americas is it's really just like hyper place-based eating, right? I mean, and our ancestors will utilize the nutrients and the food relatives that are available to us where we are located. So for many folks now, we focus on both the ingredients that are, indigenous and, native to the region where we currently live, but also often to the location or the region where our tribes were originally located or would have originally been.
Okay.
Prior to colonialism.
So, that's interesting. So you've migrated to different areas. So you're trying to also instill what was from the original location that you were into where you are now. Is that right?
Correct. I mean, there are so many different tribes and their individual cultures and histories really vary, and spiritual practices vary vastly amongst tribes. Of course, there are some, very shared Indigenous values that you see, but each tribe is very distinct in their culture and their histories and their practices, and a lot of those were informed by where they resided for millennia prior to colonialism. And so their food stories and their tribal traditions are often based on regions where maybe they're currently not located for a lot of tribes.
And is that well documented? I mean, through cookbooks, through history books, how are you bringing that about?
So one of the organizations that I work with, the I Collective, we are a collective, an autonomous collective of Indigenous chefs and seed savers, activists, artists, knowledge keepers. That's kind of one of the areas that we are looking to address. I mean, unfortunately, a lot of Indigenous history is not written by Indigenous folks. Even a lot of our written language resources are not written by Indigenous folks. They were written by missionaries who were looking to communicate with tribes. And so they started creating the written form of our languages. Not a lot of people realize that the most of our tribal histories are shared verbally, through storytelling and sharing knowledge in that way. And we're also very protective of these cultural histories and stories and our spiritual practices. So there isn't an immense amount of written resources for those, especially that have maybe been displaced or disconnected from their tribes, to reconnect. And so that is a big part of what the I Collective is about, is kind of rebuilding some of those connections, building some spaces where folks can have access to resources and connect with community members and, reconnect with their Indigenous roots and build up that narrative and kind of take back that narrative and try to get more histories and more resources available that are from an actual Indigenous perspective.
Well, okay, so that takes me to something that you wrote for me before we got on the show, is that you're creating a Indigenous interactive virtual cookbook and webinar series. That sounds really cool. And that would help maybe get some of those verbal stories video, on tape.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we're so thrilled that we received some community support and, are kind of continuing to get some funding for this amazing project. And, really the idea is to create this community and resource around Indigenous food sovereignty that is created by Indigenous people for Indigenous people, and just a space for us to come together and be, vulnerable and be our authentic selves and learn from each other and, potentially engage in some challenging conversations around food and foodways and just also just make basic, access to knowledge of Indigenous ingredients accessible to everyone.
Okay, so there's another term in there that you use that I want to explain for the listeners: food sovereignty. Food sovereignty. Can you?
Yeah. So food sovereignty is essentially like autonomy, like food autonomy and access. It's basically the idea that everyone has the right to access to both nutritional and culturally appropriate food. Obviously with the move of many tribes to reservations, the existence of so many kind of food deserts, folks being relocated to areas, again, where all of their food traditions are lost because of that change. And then the government, starting the commodity foods programming, just so many things that have really affected our health and the way that Indigenous folks interact with the land and their food. And of course, there's always been, a large amount of individuals that have been resilient and persevered and, saved our, I hear stories of elders who, as they were being marched to their reservation, they were hiding seeds in their hair and in order to hold on to these relatives. And it's all just really powerful and heartbreaking, but also, like, I just feel like we're at that point where there's just a real heavy focus, and we have all this access to technology and media, and you're seeing a lot more youth engagement and involvement in reconnecting with these foodways and persevering and realizing that, if we don't all start learning our languages and learning our foodways, that they'll be lost.
So do you see a lot of kids really interested in this, millennials and younger ones?
Yeah, I really do. I feel like, obviously in a broad sense, the culinary industry as a whole, I feel is just
Uh-huh.
kind of um, a focus kind of some of these younger generations.
Right.
And I feel like it can be like a nice path. For me personally, um, my father did not grow up on the reservation or with his in native family. And we didn't meet his biological family and become enrolled in our tribe until about 13 years ago.
Oh,
So
wow.
I as well have been on this journey to kind of explore my Indigenous identity and understand, what that means and build those connections. And, as somebody that's been working in the food industry my entire life, that was just the most natural place for me to start building those connections, right? Because it's just a space where I already felt comfortable and confident. And um, I feel like that's kind of just that growing edge of our youth. It's just a really great entry point. And I also previously studied eco psychology at Northland College in Ashland, Wisconsin, and there I kind of had a focus and emphasis on horticulture therapy. So I already had like a lot of these ideas about um, food as healing and just not just food itself, but just that connection to the land and the action of growing your own food, producing your own food, and like the effects that alone can have on your spiritual and mental well-being and physical well-being, of course. So yeah, I do feel like I'm seeing a lot more youth that are kind of getting excited and getting involved and having an interest and a passion to help build these communities and help preserve these cultures. And, some of it is just added access to resources, through different tribal organizations or other Indigenous led nonprofits, that have really been paving the way to build different programming and opportunities and culture camps and just building more spaces for this to happen and making sure that our youth are exposed to it at as young of an age as possible.
After the fact, I'm going to introduce you to the Small Bites Adventure Club. They're out of Atlanta, but it's a mail to you kids kit to introduce to food. So you guys need to connect.
Cool.
Aaron and Asita and Judith Winfrey, oh, she's going to kill me. There's 4 women that are doing it. It's a great little organization. So that would help you guys, I think, do it a different way as well. So as you're doing this research and delving into your history, which just really kind of reiterates everything that people are trying to do now, is like find out where they originally came from, right? There's so many commercials on it. But have you found you talked about your dad being, a member of the tribe. What about your mom or doing this research? Have you gotten any, because it's Women's History Month, good advice from women in the tribe and around the cooking or, how to move forward with your life?
Yeah, I mean, I've learned so much from reconnecting with both my tribal community as well as, all of the amazing, peers, mentors, aunties that I have been blessed to work with over the past 4 years or so as I've really become involved within the Indigenous food sovereignty movement. One thing that always really speaks to me is that was kind of a huge transition for me, right? Working in traditional professional kitchen settings, like that the kitchen culture, as they say, never really felt like a super comfortable space for me. And just being in the kitchen with other Indigenous folks has been just one of the most impactful experiences. And one of the things that resonates with me the most is the teachings of gentleness and how, we impart a part of our own spirit into the food that we cook. And that, essentially, if you're not of good mind and spirit, you don't cook food for other people to consume because you're imparting, you don't want to impart that negative feelings or thoughts or energies into your food. And just that even,
Right.
has really impacted the way that I approach. And I feel like, that was just kind of already my natural, temperament, but it still like really just resonates with me. And it's something I'm very, very mindful about whenever I am cooking for community.
Well, and it just makes me think of so many movies where you see the emotion pouring into the food that you're cooking, and it's true. I mean, and because food is love. It's a way of showing your love for other people and making it and delivering it to them. But I can just imagine, that whole spiritual aspect of it, that it does come into that as well. Pretty fun. What has been when you're in this work, with food sovereignty, indigenous food sovereignty, I can't say that word. What has been your biggest obstacle, but also what has been your biggest, your greatest joy from doing it?
Oh, wow. Well, I mean, yeah, those are big questions. I mean, one obstacle for me personally, I would say is that, since kind of beginning this journey to reconnect, I have lived in, predominantly white urban environments. So just, one of the main obstacles is just, finding my people, right? Like finding other indigenous folks to connect with in person and, not have to, I am a single parent. And so, sometimes my ability to travel to events or even to spend much time with my tribe is very limited. And so just having kind of that access was probably one of my greatest challenges, and will always be probably one of my greatest challenges. I'm so blessed with, the I Collective and the Native American Food Sovereignty Alliance that I work with, that I have these just really amazing communities. And, I've been a member of the I Collective since the beginning of 2018. And, my peers there and my mentors there, they're my second family. We communicate almost every day. I'm on the phone with like at least one of them, if not all or more. And so that has been, just really, really valuable and meaningful, because that's something that a lot of urban natives face, is just, how do you connect? How do you maintain these cultural practices when you are disconnected? Like when you're not there, you don't have access to that communal ceremonies and
Right.
And other things that are happening. So that's probably one of the biggest obstacles. And then as far as joys, I mean, really just having the absolute honor and privilege to meet and build relationships with so many people that are just, have just completely changed me as a person, and have mentored me in how I exist in the world. I mean, it shifted everything for me, building these connections. I was running a full service wholesale and catering company and wasn't really feeling very fulfilled, even though my business was very successful. It wasn't what I expected, right? It wasn't what I didn't have the lifestyle balance that I wanted. And also I just was like, I studied psychology. I studied like community-based therapy. I always kind of wanted to be someone that made the world a little bit of a better place, or was able to provide some sort of support to my fellow man. But I wasn't feeling that, I was just kind of like, wow, like I feel like I'm just making, like expensive pastries for primarily like rich white folks. And it wasn't fulfilling. And this kind of natural and organic progression into what I am doing now is is just so meaningful, and I find so much joy in this work, and I feel like there's just so much more integrity behind my livelihood and where I'm putting my energy, and like I said, just the friendships and the family that I feel like I have is amazing.
That is amazing. So with all of that and learning that, the one of the things that you said to me earlier before the show was that this work has also helped deepen your understanding of the global food system. And even though you're looking at, indigenous foods that may be like right there from where you are, how does that impact the global food system?
Yeah, wow.
That's a big question.
It's a big question. That's okay. I mean, the one thing that is so interesting and so fascinating, as I continue kind of to do work within these community spaces and where we are representing Indigenous foodways in different community spaces, is, we have the opportunity to work with a lot of other grassroots organizations or communities that are representing other, marginalized groups of folks, and meeting people from all over the world, and just kind of finding that common ground that, obviously there are Indigenous people to every continent, right? And a lot of them have the same, they're having kind of parallel struggles in a lot of ways, and they're on a similar path and a similar journey to just preserve their rich cultural histories and practices. And that's just it's increasingly difficult for everyone, just the way that society has shifted. And I do think we have it a little bit harder in some areas, just because we have capitalism to combat with, and not everyone has that, and that is just so kind of opposite of so many Indigenous values. And so operating kind of in this capitalist structure and this colonialist structure is really challenging, even for like Indigenous led nonprofits to that's a big part of the work that I've been doing and focusing on over the past year, is just really, I'm helping to build this nonprofit, right? Like, we just formed, we're a new organization. We started as a collective, we evolved into a nonprofit, we're fiscally sponsored. But how do we build our systems, our leadership dynamics in a way that is reflective of our Indigenous values and not reflective of the structure that folks expect?
Okay.
And that's just been a real learning curve, in an area where I've really been investing a lot of my time and energy, is like, how can we build efficient communication and leadership structures that are in line with our own values and the work that we're trying to do. And so I think that that's kind of just one of those big things, is just reconnecting those trade routes, and connecting with other Indigenous communities, connecting with the Black community in North America has been just really important. There's lots of land back campaigns and other things going on that provide a really amazing opportunity for Indigenous and Black folks to come together in solidarity and work towards a common goal.
That's really, really interesting. And I was talking to last week Caterer in Atlanta, and actually my old neighborhood, which is predominantly Black, and she's seeing gentrification and changes, and so she's trying to save the Black culture through food, through her incubator that she's got, Marty's, and that really is just, it's saving that history, which you guys are trying to get. And when you don't have it documented in a variety of ways, and it's passed down through family, let's just say family Bibles or family books, or in, through stories. That's going to be really challenging to do, but also so powerful to put that message out to everybody.
Mm-hmm.
I need to introduce you to her too. Wow.
Yes, please.
Yes. So one of the other things that I really liked was that you're doing is through the Native American Food Sovereignty Alliance, and you for that organization, you're the Food and Culinary Program Manager, where you're building an international food sovereignty mentorship program. So talk about that.
Yeah, so that program is just in its second year. They had kind of a pilot year last year, which of course all of their plans kind of got thrown out because of COVID-19. So, they hired me on this year, and I'm just so excited to be in this role. I feel like it's just the absolute perfect place for me to be, to help kind of build the strategic plan and the vision for this program. So right now it functions as it's an international culinary mentorship program. We do share a lot of information also about seed saving and some agricultural focus, and we really kind of let the mentees guide the programming. We're still kind of in that space this year where we don't know how much in-person activities will be able to happen. Definitely hoping for next year. And really what our goal is moving forward is, again, there's so many different tribes that have different culinary practices and different spiritual practices. And so, we don't have any intention of building a mentorship program that's all encompassing and is going to be able to, mentor every person in the way that they wish to get mentored. Right now, we're providing that space to just have that dialogue, build that community. And what we're really working towards is building a smaller scale, like replicable mentorship program that we can then, help different tribes or organizations implement within their own communities. So that's kind of our more long-term goal. But right now we're just kind of building that space, bringing together, elders and knowledge holders with youth or folks that are just, getting interested in connecting with these foodways, and just kind of providing that space to build that community and have those conversations. And some of it is through actual through a virtual learning space where they actually go through like a classroom setup. And then some of that is just through really fun activities like social media challenges, having virtual cook-alongs, and just kind of some other really fun activities like that.
I like the term cook-alongs.
Yeah.
That's a fun term. Yeah. Instead of, cooking demo, but you're cooking alongside. Yeah. I like that. I'm going to use that. That's okay. So we're in Women's History Month, and I think a lot of what you're doing is about the history of, it's not, or I don't think it, I know it's about the history of your culture. And so you're bringing all that to life. How do you want to be remembered in history?
Really, I only wish to, reflect well upon, my family and my peers and my community, my mentors, my ancestors. I don't choose to do this work because I necessarily want to be remembered. I do it because I am capable, and it's just so important to me that my livelihood is reflective of my values. And so I guess I'm just, I hope that that's how I'm remembered, is that I do my best to bring, my full authentic self into the spaces that I enter, and that I'm just laying myself at service to the community and contributing to this work in whatever way I can.
That's a very generous thing to do and to be remembered for. So no, that's beautiful. So how can people get in touch with, work with, and actually when I say that, work with iCollective, but even the Food Sovereignty Alliance, but going back to the very beginning when I said you were with Amy and Jesse at Belly of the Beast, you said you were in residence. So explain that. And can other restaurants around the country do that? Catering companies? What does that mean?
Absolutely. So the I Collective is, again, we're a collective of individuals, and many of us have our own businesses. Many of us do consultant work. So folks can reach out to the I Collective for, if they're looking for someone to speak at an event or cook for an event or do, a cooking demo. We have, of course, adapted and have been doing a lot of virtual, conversations and cooking demos and things of that nature. And we are definitely, this was our first time doing like a full kind of long-term residency, but it was quite successful. And I think we absolutely would be open to doing something again of this nature, especially, now that we did all that work and we learned, so many things. It'd kind of be fun to do it again and do it, just even more efficiently. Another time. But what that looked like is, and part of how that happened is, just due to the pandemic, right? So many restaurants, so many small restaurants are struggling and have faced some serious adversity. And especially, even if they qualified for certain, assistance programs, sometimes they were left waiting for long periods of time. And with this unknown, like, are we getting funding? Are we getting support? Like, what is this going to look like? And, Amy from Belly of the Beast had some, good relationships with some of our founding members of our organization. And also many of our members of the I Collective had also been, laid off or, a lot of us do a lot of traveling and consulting and just a lot of events and things that had been canceled. And so just this beautiful discussion happened of like, well, is there a way that we can kind of support each other through this really challenging time? And so we were just like, let's do this. We were able to keep on all of the Belly of the Beast staff that they had. So we didn't like just kind of come in and fully take over. We worked kind of within their system and their structures that they had. We worked to utilize as much of the food stores that they already, had. And kind of adapt in that way. Of course, we did bring in, a good amount of Indigenous produced ingredients as well, but also, utilizing what we had. And I feel like it was really, really successful. I mean, our goal was to make sure that Belly of the Beast stayed open and we're able to keep all of their staff on. And we just brought in kind of a rotation of somewhere between 1 and 3 I Collective members at a time to also be working in the kitchen, and we did all the menu development, and then we had one functioning on-site like kitchen manager throughout the duration as well. So I did that for the second half of the residency, acted as kind of the kitchen manager, obviously working very closely with Amy and doing all the menu development and just working in the kitchen. And it was just a really amazing fruitful experience. So I definitely think that we will be open to doing something of that nature again. And we also have done, many of our members do things on a smaller scale as well. Actually, during that same time period, I did a brief menu takeover for the month of November at another restaurant in Boston called Haley House. Okay. And so that's kind of another thing too, if folks are looking to specifically highlight Indigenous producers or ingredients or, recipes, we can work with different restaurants to develop a menu and train their staff to produce a menu. But we do always require that if you're going to run our Indigenous menu, that you source as many of the ingredients as possible from Indigenous producers.
So, okay, on that note, there's one question that I typically ask all of my guests, and what's your favorite food and beverage? But I want to go, what have you discovered Indigenous wise that's your favorite? I want to focus in on that.
Oh, that's a big one too, especially because, like I said, I was pretty familiar with, what like kind of a lot of the native foods were from my region just as a chef and and somebody that had a passion in that area before. But one of the, greatest joys and opportunities through these organizations that I have worked with, is just getting to meet Indigenous chefs, and elders from all over, and being exposed to so many beautiful foods that I did not know existed before, right? I'm trying to think of what some of my favorites are. There's so many. I mean, choya buds is probably one that's right up there for me. So yeah, it's like the fruit of the choya cactus. They're very spiky, like they're very labor intensive, for harvesting. And they have like all these little spindles on them. They're kind of slimy because from the cactus. But they are so delicious, and they're really good pickled, and they kind of have a flavor and texture of asparagus almost. So that's kind of one thing. But yeah, as somebody that has worked, a good portion of my culinary career as a pastry chef, I think one of the most fun things for me throughout this journey has been, and there's not a ton of like true traditional, like Indigenous desserts, right? Like we didn't really consume much in the way of sugary or sweet things. I mean, we obviously didn't have processed sugar, and that's not something that is utilized, but adapting to the modern world, like folks want a dessert course. And so that's been like a really fun journey for me, is playing with all of these different Indigenous grains and ways to sweeten things to create some really interesting and dynamic like desserts and pastries. Has been just really fun. There's like a mesquite flour that is one that is really fun to play with. It has this very smoky, nutty, kind of bitter flavor, and that is like the actual, it's a plant, it's the pods that are ground up, and it just adds such an interesting, complex, it's just a flavor that, there's nothing that can replicate that flavor. And other things that I had been exposed to, but didn't realize that like there were so many different variations, regionally, like sumac. I was kind of familiar with the sumac that is indigenous to the Great Lakes region. But then I, being exposed to 3-leaf sumac, which is kind of more something available in the Southwest region, and just being able to see like those flavor differences or the different ways that folks cook has just been really amazing. Like one staple thing in the diet of many tribes is corn, right? Corn mush. But that's one thing that's so fascinating to me, is like so many tribes, like while it seems like it's such a simple, food, right, to have corn mush, but every tribe has different, obviously different corn varieties that they use most often. And then they, in order to nixtamalize corn and make it, digestible and palatable, and to be able to get all the nutrients out of it, you use different forms of cooking ash. And so that's another thing that kind of varies. So it's like different corn, and then also different kind of cooking ash. And just, it's like so simple. It's just 2 ingredients, right? But it can create just such a crazy difference in flavors. And just as a chef, like that, was definitely one of the first things that just was like, wow.
Cooking ash, you mean like ashes from wood, or what?
Yeah. So a lot of folks commonly use hardwood ash, but you can also use, like juniper ash, or avocado, burnt, like corn husks turned to ash. I mean, there's so many different kinds of ash. And when you have that produced, it provides the, what's necessary to nixtamalize and help make that corn more digestible. So it's, and I feel like I'm always learning about new ash, cooking ashes. Yeah. And it's, again, like, it's just such a simple thing, and it's a thing that so many tribes share, but it's so different. And that's really amazing. I would love to just bring representatives from a whole bunch of different tribes and regions together, just have them make their families, corn mush, and just like go through and taste them all. I feel like that would be like a dream.
That would be a lot of fun. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so my final question is, if you, especially with all the work that you do, if you could have anyone in the world over for dinner, alive or who's passed, who would you choose and why?
That's a tough one too. That's such a big question because there's so many people. I mean, my favorite thing in the world is to cook for people and to chat. So, I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is just because, I've been working with the I Collective for a couple of years. And, while some of us have been able to come together in person for different events, like because all of my collective members have become such a part of my family, and I am talking to them so frequently, like, as simple as that is, like being able to invite them all over to my home and for us to all hold space together would be just a real dream. But then just speaking of just kind of random famous people, the first person that comes to mind is actually Maya Rudolph, who's, a famous actress and comedian. And she's just somebody that I love. I just feel like she brings, she uses her skill and talents to bring so much joy. And just as a multiracial woman in the industry, I just feel like, she's been really paving the way for so many other people and so many other women. And I just feel like she'd be a really good time to have over for dinner. Really, in general, I'm a pretty silly person, and I actually have a background in, community theater and singing, and some of that is stuff that I kind of left behind to focus on my culinary passions. But I still have, a real affinity for musicianship and artistry and performance art in that way. It's something that I still really, really value and have a lot of interest in. And I love that she, she started as, she was in a band, and then, got on SNL, and, yeah, I just think she seems pretty rad.
I agree. And she does laundry detergent commercials that are funny. Now, yeah. Well, thank you so much. I definitely want to talk to you more, because I think this is so amazing that what you're doing, and the fact that you're bringing back the culture of the food of your ancestors and other tribes around the country and around the world is fascinating, and something that we can all learn from, because food is such an easy way to learn and get to know people. So thank you for what you do.
Thank you.
I have put links to the icollectiveinc.org website in the chat, as well as the nativefoodalliance.org in there. And then actually one of your other iCollective members, Hillel, I interviewed her last year, and I just posted that link to her interview. So thanks again for everything that you do, and let's definitely stay in touch. And I'm going to introduce you to some other people that I think would be really,
wonderful,
good for both of you, for all of you to collaborate. So until next time, thanks.
Miigwech.
What did you say?
I said miigwech means thank you.
Okay, miigwech. Thank you. So everybody, thank you for tuning in. This is the Eating at a Meeting podcast. And on today's show, we had the pleasure of chatting with Chef Kristina Stanley of the I Collective and Native American Food Sovereignty Alliance. And we're here every Wednesday at 12 o'clock Eastern, chatting with other fabulous food and beverage experts. So tune in here and check us out on all podcast platforms. Stay safe and eat well, everybody. Thanks.